You don't think it's falling apart. Not at first. You think it's a detour, a delay, a test of patience that will resolve itself by next month, maybe the month after, if you just hold steady and keep believing. You have held steady, you have kept believing, but it has been longer than a month. And somewhere between the third time the plan collapsed and the fifth unanswered prayer and the seventh person who asked how things were going, and you said fine because you didn't know what else to say, a question started forming that you have never let finish. What if this isn't a test I'm supposed to endure? What if it's a turn I'm supposed to take? You have built your life around a specific version of where it was going. It was a good version. Reasonable. Faithful. You prayed over it, confirmed it, told people about it, made decisions based on it. The job was going to become the career. The relationship was going to become the marriage. The plan was going to become the testimony. You were not asking for too much. You were not being greedy. You were being obedient as far as you could tell, and the version of your life you had been building felt like exactly the kind of thing God would want for you. Which is why it doesn't make sense that so much of it keeps not working. The job interviews don't land. The doors that seem to be opening close right as you reach them. The relationship that looked like an answer started showing you, slowly and then all at once, that it was not what you thought it was. The apartment, the city, the timeline you had in your head, one by one, they don't hold. And you are still here, still showing up, still tithing, still in the room on Sunday morning, still trying to be someone whose faith doesn't waver. But here's the thing nobody tells you about faith under pressure. It is possible to keep your faith completely intact and still be oriented toward the wrong destination. God can be fully present in your life and still be pulling you away from the thing you have decided is the answer. This is the difference. The one your heart is not yet sure it wants to believe. Life falling apart looks like chaos. It looks like one loss after another with no pattern, no direction, no sense of an invisible hand moving anything. It feels like abandonment. It feels like the silence of someone who has stopped listening. Redirection doesn't feel like that. Redirection feels like resistance, like walking through water, like effort that should be producing results and isn't, like the ground under a plan keeps shifting no matter how many times you reinforce it. You are not abandoned. You are being repositioned. But from the inside, in the middle of it, before you can see any of the new direction, these two things feel almost identical. That is not a sign of weak faith. That is a sign of how precise the pressure is. God does not redirect carelessly. He redirects with enough force to actually move you. Think about the specific thing that collapsed most recently. Not the oldest loss, the recent one. The one that still has a small bruise on it when you press. You had a reason to believe it would work. You were not delusional. The evidence pointed toward yes. People you trusted affirmed it. You prayed and felt peace about it. And then it didn't work, and the peace you had felt beforehand now seems like it was either a mistake or a lie, and neither of those options is something you know how to carry. But consider a third option. The peace was real. God gave it to you, not as a promise of that specific outcome, but as permission to move in that direction so that the redirection you needed could happen from a closer position. Sometimes God lets you get near the thing before he closes it, not to torture you, to show you what's actually on the other side of it, to let you see, from close enough to touch it, that it would not have held you, that the version of you who would have gotten that thing would have eventually found out the same truth, but later, and at a higher cost. You have been trying to figure out the difference by looking at outcomes. If it works, God said yes. If it doesn't work, either God said no, or there's an attack on what God said yes to. And your job is to figure out which one and respond accordingly. This framework is not wrong, exactly, but it is incomplete, because it treats your original plan as the reference point. And what if the reference point itself was never the destination? What if the plan you've been defending, the thing you keep trying to rebuild every time it falls, was always meant to be the vehicle that got you close enough to see where you actually need to go? The plan was not wrong. The plan was scaffolding. Scaffolding is not the building. Scaffolding is what you use while the building is going up. And when the building can stand on its own, the scaffolding comes down. Its removal is not destruction. It is completion. Here is what redirection has in it that falling apart doesn't. Direction. It sounds simple. It sounds obvious. But when you are inside it, it is the hardest thing to see because the direction is not toward where you are headed. It is toward something you haven't named yet. Something that, if you are honest, you have caught glimpses of in the spaces left behind by the collapsed plan. The thing you noticed yourself thinking about in the silence after the job didn't come through. The conversation you had that made you feel more alive than anything in the plan had made you feel in 2 years. The door that is still open. The one you keep treating as a consolation because it isn't what you originally wanted, and you haven't stopped to consider whether it might be the actual answer. You have been so fixed on what didn't open that you have barely looked at what did. Sit with the open doors for a moment, not the closed ones. You have spent significant time and energy standing in front of the closed doors, praying them open, asking God why they're closed, trying to understand what you did wrong. But closed doors are closed. They are not puzzles you are supposed to solve from this side. They are information. They are God telling you the answer to that specific question, which is no or not now or not this way, and all three of those answers are complete. The open door you've been undervaluing is where the question is still alive. And something in you already knows this. That is why you feel a specific kind of unease when you look at it. Not the unease of a dead end, the unease of something real, something that would require you to become a version of yourself you haven't fully agreed to become yet. That is not a reason to avoid it. That is the reason to walk through it. Redirection is more expensive than you thought it would be. This is the part they don't include in the testimony version of the story, the one told after everything works out, and the original plan looks naive from the other side of where God actually took you. The testimonies are true, but they are told from the end, with the benefit of resolution, and what gets compressed out of them is the cost of the middle. The middle is where you are right now. The middle is where the original plan is clearly not working, and the new direction is not yet clear enough to name. The middle is where you have to keep making decisions with incomplete information, trusting that the resistance you feel is not punishment, but navigation. That the doors closing behind you are not God abandoning you, but God making sure you don't go back to the thing that was never going to hold you. The middle is the part of the testimony nobody requests to live in. You are living in it. That is not evidence that God has left. That is evidence that something is actually being built. There is grief and redirection that you are allowed to feel. This is not a contradiction of faith. It is an honest acknowledgement that you wanted something specific, and you are not getting it in the form you wanted it, the relationship you believed in, the opportunity that felt like it had your name on it, the version of your life that felt aligned and purposeful and finally on its way. Grieving the loss of these things does not mean you don't trust God. It means you are genuinely invested. God does not expect you to skip the grief. He walks into it with you. The mistake is not feeling the loss. The mistake is setting up permanent residence there, treating grief as a destination rather than a passage. There is something you are being freed from that you did not ask to be freed from. This is often the part that makes redirection feel most like punishment. You wanted the thing. You wanted it sincerely, not selfishly. You built your identity around certain assumptions about how your life was going to look. The title, the relationship, the place, the future you could picture when you closed your eyes. And God is currently dismantling the picture, not because the picture was evil, but because the picture was drawn by someone who didn't know what you know now before you moved through the experiences that showed you what you actually need to become. The person you were when you made the plan needed that plan. The person you are now, the one who has been shaped by every collapsed version of it, needs something the original plan was never designed to give you, and God knows the difference, even when you don't. You are not starting over. This is the lie the enemy tells in the middle of redirection because it is the most discouraging version of what's happening. And discouragement is the tool that makes people stop just before the turn. You are not starting over. You are starting from here. And here is not empty. Here contains everything you have learned from every plan that didn't hold. It contains the clarity you couldn't have had before. It contains the character that only gets built when you keep showing up without the guarantee of outcome. It contains a faith that has been tested enough to be real, not just inherited, not just habitual, but personally yours, in a way it could not have been before the pressure came. That is not nothing. That is the foundation of the next thing. And the next thing is being built on ground that the old plan, if it had worked, would have covered over. The prayer you have been praying, the one asking God to fix what's broken and restore what was lost, may need to change. Not because God can't restore, because what you are experiencing may not be something that needs to be put back together. It may be something that needs to be followed forward, into the direction you can almost see. The one that appears in your quietest moments right before you dismiss it because it doesn't look like the plan. You have been faithful. The faithfulness is not wasted. None of it is wasted. But faithfulness is not the same as being right about the destination. You can be completely faithful and completely pointed in the wrong direction. What is being asked of you now is not more endurance aimed at the same closed door. What is being asked is the harder thing, the willingness to let the original picture go, to open both hands, to say out loud or just somewhere deep inside you where only you and God can hear it, I was headed somewhere, and I am open to the possibility that you are taking me somewhere better. That is not defeat. That is the exact moment redirection becomes something you can finally move inside of rather than just survive. You will tell this story one day, not to everyone, to the right person at the right time, the one who is standing exactly where you are standing now, looking at the same closed doors, holding the same grief, asking the same question you are asking tonight. And when you tell it, you will have the benefit of resolution. You will be on the other side, You will see the whole map from above, and the turn that felt like collapse will look like the most important turn you ever made. You will be tempted to summarize the middle, to compress it, to get to the good part quickly. Don't. Tell them what the middle cost. Tell them that you thought it was falling apart and it wasn't. Tell them it took you longer than you wanted to understand the difference. Tell them it was worth it. Tell them the thing that didn't work was never the answer, but it was the question that got you close enough to hear the real one. That is not a consolation. That is how this works.